Ty, tell me a story.
Fuck you.
Ooh, that's my favorite one. Welcome back to Ty and That Guy. I'm Wes Chatham, and this is my good buddy, Ty Franck. And today, we're going to be talking about what, Ty?
Well, one of the greatest movies of the 80s, man. First in many ways. It launched the 80s buddy cop movie thing, came out 5 years before Lethal Weapon and did the buddy thing and launched Eddie Murphy's career, turned him into a fucking rock star, 48 Hours.
Now, a lot of people, Ty, will throw out, what about the Kurosawa, Stray Dog, or Freebie and the Bean, or Dirty Harry 3, or, fuck you. This is the creation of the subgenre of the buddy cop movie. This is, for me, this is the beginning of the buddy cop movie. Now, there were movies
and it's not even two cops. It's a cop and a criminal. It's not even two cops. But it's still the beginning of the buddy cop thing.
Yeah, it is. I guess we should start off by saying this movie is very racist.
Oh, my God.
And it does not age well. So trigger warning.
It's super racist.
Yes.
It's super misogynist. Nick Nolte is just a douchebag through the entire thing.
It might be one of the most misogynist movies of the 80s.
Yes.
And that's saying
this movie doesn't just like brush up against transgressive social issues. This movie knocks social issues down, whips out its dick, and pees on them in front of everyone. This movie leans all the way into it.
And on all levels, right? So all levels in the sense of how marginalized the characters are in the movie, the female characters, but also just even when they're unaware, just how they just how they're using women as like just throwing them around and like using them as props as they go through. I mean, poor, what's her name, Rosie, the one that was taken hostage. Yeah. They're just yanking her ass around the whole fucking movie. And we don't even know what happens to her at the end. Like, I don't know.
Because she's not important. She was a prop.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And I don't think there is a single white character in the entire movie who fails to call Eddie Murphy the N-word.
Right.
In the entire movie. I think every single white character calls him that at some point.
Even Frank McRae, the chief, calls him that.
Everybody.
Yeah. And, I'm jumping ahead, but just to address it, even Nick Nolte's apology to Eddie Murphy is a racist idea of what an apology is.
Yes.
And Eddie Murphy's like, that don't really explain it all, but fuck. And he just, and like, how do you do the Eddie? How does Eddie Murphy do his laugh?
I can't do the Eddie Murphy laugh.
I can't do it. It kind of reminds me of a little bit of Back to the Future Dad. What's his name? It's like,
Crispin Glover.
Anyway, I wish I could do it. Anyway, because it's just like, hey, all those terrible things that I said to you through the whole movie, I'm just trying to keep you down. That's just part of my job. And he's like, that doesn't really fucking explain anything or make anything better.
Yeah, it's like, its apology is basically like, look, all that racist shit I said, it's only because I'm trying to keep black people in their place.
Exactly.
And it's like, what? How is that an apology?
It's like, Jesus Christ, if you don't think we've made progress, go watch 48 Hours. And you're like,
and this was the beginning of the 80s, so we still had the sort of the leftover 70s, Dirty Harry, cops should be allowed to shoot people, you got to keep black people in their place. We still had that social thing from the 70s, and we had all the cocaine of the 80s. So those two things mixed together into this delightful stew that makes 48 Hours. It's super coked out dudes playing off the racist tropes of the 70s and made this magical thing. Like, and by the way, I'm just going to say, this movie is incredibly racist. It's incredibly misogynist. It is super transgressive on basically every social issue. And just go into it knowing that you're going to be offended, but it's fucking great. This movie created Eddie Murphy as a rock star movie star for 20 years. This movie launched him.
What do you forget when you go back and watch it? Eddie Murphy doesn't come on the screen till like 20 something minutes.
Yeah. And he has the greatest character introduction of any of these kinds of movies. His first scene is classic.
Did you know that Breck Eisner's dad almost had Eddie Murphy fired because they were scared that he wasn't funny enough. Did you know that when they're doing the movie? Eddie Murphy talks about it. Like he was almost got fired because he wasn't funny enough.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, next time I'm talking to Michael, I will bring that up.
Yeah. Well, he didn't do it, so that's a good thing. Now, let me ask you a question. So when I'm watching this movie, going back and watching, which I think is the creation of the buddy cop genre, even though Eddie Murphy's not a cop, but the atmosphere in this movie is so compelling. It has that 70s grit, like Walter Hill still like gritty, that 70s, those long lingering shots, and it's raw, and people are walking in front of the camera, and and the thing. And Nick Nolte comes on the screen. Why is Nick Nolte likable? Why are you drawn to him? Because I sit back, I'm like, he's a terrible fucking cop.
Yep.
He's a terrible person.
Yep.
And
somehow he manages to look like he smells bad.
He looks
I don't know how he does that. He just always looks like he kind of smells bad. Like he hasn't showered in a couple of days.
He looks like he gargles with Crush and Run rocks in the morning. And I should be mad at this movie because what a waste of Annette O'Toole as an actress in this film. Because they wake up together and she's there, and then they have the conflict between them, and you're like, oh, she's going to be a major part of this, right? And she's
Annette O'Toole.
Yeah, Annette O'Toole, and she's a fantastic. This was before she was Annette O'Toole, but you could tell she's a fantastic actress, and she's got a great screen presence. But throughout the fucking movie, it's like she's just like, don't do this to me, Jack. Fuck you, Jack. And it's like they're just making plans that it's just phone calls to check in and be like, hey, sorry, I'm still an asshole. I can't do the thing we plan to do. It's like, why do you keep making fucking plans, Jack? There's a cop killer with a gun going around killing people. Just say, hey, I got to deal with this, and then I can come back later, and maybe we can have a date. But stop fucking around with Annette O'Toole. Either use her, shit, or get off the pot, Walter Hill. Shit or get off the pot. But I'm fucking in. I'm in that first scene with him coming up and the whole story. It's like, if you let me stay over your house, you can have a clean shirt. What makes you think I got clean shirts in my house? It's like that.
See, that's what I mean. He always looks like he smells bad. But her amazingness and his awfulness does lead to one of the great lines of the movie. When Nick Nolte is describing the fact that he has a girlfriend, and Eddie Murphy says, I never cease to be amazed by the generosity of women.
Hey, Joseph, let's just run through some stats real quick to give people a place and time and how this movie did.
Alrighty. Well, it was released in December 1982 and a whopping 850 screens, which seems crazy by today's standards. It went on to gross $78.8 million. And then, obviously, as you guys said, it was Eddie Murphy's film debut. And it was credited as popularizing the buddy cop movie genre, leading to Beverly Hills Cop, Running Scared, and, of course, Lethal Weapon.
Thanks, buddy. So, one of the things that I think works really well for this movie, and I think when buddy cops get it wrong, is the danger is real, and it's the priority. The tone of it is like people are getting fucking killed. They have to have this thing happen. And the comedy is there coming from characters' point of view to break tension.
Yep.
And that works well for me. I find that some of the buddy cop movies recently, comedy is the priority and the danger secondary. And I never get into those movies. I never get in. If I'm not in there, like if Midnight Run, there's real threats. People are really getting hurt. There's real stakes, and there's such low lives, and the comedy comes from that, like these bounty hunters. And this one is through Nick Nolte's point of view of Reggie Hammond, and Reggie Hammond's point of view towards Nick Nolte. That's where all the comedy comes from.
Yeah, it plays the straight parts. It plays them straight. It doesn't make fun of the danger. It doesn't make fun of the killings and the threat. So when it's funny, it's okay for it to be funny with the interplay between the two guys. Like whenever I'm watching a movie, and you know the movies I'm talking about, when you're watching a movie and two guys are pinned down behind a brick wall as somebody's spraying bullets over their heads and they're cracking jokes to each other, that immediately pushes me out of the film. Right? I mean, like, if you peek your head up, you're going to get your head blown off, you're going to be focused on that. You're not going to be like, hey, here, I got this funny one-liner I'm going to hit my guy over there with. You're keeping your fucking head down so you don't die, right? And this movie never does that. When the bullets are flying, everybody takes it really fucking seriously because they don't want to get shot, right? So that, I agree with you, that is a mistake a lot of buddy cop movies make. People are cracking jokes all the time, even when there's danger, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's why Lethal Weapon is one of the better of these, because they might joke after the violence is over, right? Like when the violence is done, there might be that moment of where you release your breath and you go, oh, glad we didn't get shot, and you might make a little quip. But while the bullets are flying, nobody's joking. And this movie takes that part very seriously, which I appreciate.
And you know, the comedy comes from the characters, whereas like certain comedy, the joke is the most important thing, even if a character kind of has to do something out of character to achieve that joke.
Right.
Whereas I think it was Lethal Weapon 2 when Riggs is like, you know, he's laying and he's dying, and Murtaugh's, you know, arms, and he's grasping his last breath, and he's like, get, you know, reaching in, get the cigarettes, and he pulls the cigarettes out, and he's spilling them all over his chest, and he gets one, and he puts it in his mouth, and he goes, throw them away, those things will kill you. And then it's like, it's fucking hilarious because he's just trying to ease his partner's tension that he's watching him die. Right. And so it's like, it brings them together as this thing. And like, you know, that's the good joke. When I first discovered Walter Hill was a movie called Hard Times. I think we talked about it on this podcast.
Hard Times, man. Classic.
With Charles Bronson. Hard Times is always and Walter Hill's really good at this. Hard Times is always my go-to when I talk about fight consistency. So you get an idea who Charles Bronson is, you get it out, and then it's a street fighting movie where he goes and fights these guys. And the consistency of it, they didn't try to make each fight scene dramatic and interesting. They stayed consistent to each one's talent level that the movie has established. Yeah. And so there's some where Charles Bronson just went and fucking drills the guy in the first punch and the guy's fucking done, right? And it's like, yes, if you went up against somebody that has some pro pedigree, he's going to fucking stomp your ass.
Well, and Charles Bronson was a specimen before actors were always specimens.
Yeah.
Right, like that was back when actors just looked like regular people. Well, and Bronson was a fucking specimen.
Bronson was a specimen pre-steroids.
Yes, so that's exactly what I mean. Yep.
That is homegrown specimen. All right, that was before steroids.
Yeah, that was before every actor had like a nutritionist and a trainer like putting them on the all salmon diet for 4 weeks before their shirtless scene. Right?
Yeah. But so what I love about Walter Hill movies, and this movie specifically, when Sonny rolls up to escape James Remar from the chain gang, you know, you're watching this and you're like, all right, do they have some, because you know, it's building up like James, it's like, you know, Escape from Alcatraz, like they have this big long orchestrated fucking plan, and the way like how it's building up and the music, James Remar's eyes are kind of darting around, you see this truck coming, you're like, oh shit, there's like this elaborate fucking plan, there's going to be a guy in the mud that comes out and all this stuff, and they pull out and they get there, and all that build up with James Horner's score and the sax and everything and all this build up, and when he walks up to the guy, and the guy's saying a lot of racist shit, and then they start fighting, and then and you're like, wait a minute, this is the plan? Like, let's just fucking start fighting, and then you steal my gun, and then we just start blasting our way out? These motherfuckers got shotguns and rifles that are trained on you, and they have space on you, and you're just gonna go out in a blaze of glory? So if I see that, I'm okay with it if it's consistent throughout the movie. These guys never have a fucking elaborate plan. They're just wild motherfuckers.
They're just wild men. Yep.
And they're just fucking throwing bullets everywhere, just blasting their way out of everything. And so it stays consistent. He creates the rules of violence, creates everybody's talent level, and then from there, they have their final fight through all of those things. If James Remar all of a sudden had this highly orchestrated plan, or he operated in a level of competency that he's demonstrated before, that always takes me out of it.
Yeah, and they never play James Remar or Sonny Landham as like commandos, right? They're just crazy guys.
Crazy motherfuckers.
They're crazy sociopaths. They're willing to do anything. They don't give a fuck. They are like the living embodiment of don't give a fuck.
Yeah.
And that's how they get away with stuff because people don't expect that level of crazy.
Yeah.
And like you said, they're not like, they're not like Navy SEALs. They just throw bullets everywhere, hoping something hits something and then take off, right?
Because 9 times out of 10, they would be dead motherfuckers on that chain gang. You know what I'm saying? And they just happen to have that one where they kind of escaped, and you realize like, oh, these guys are just flying by the seat of their motherfucking pants. And I get it, and I know what they're up against,
Yep.
And then, our friend of the Expanse, the guy in the Expanse world, Johnny Banks shows up. Johnny Banks shows up. Yeah, now, I know. Every time I see him, I'm excited. Now, this confused me for many years, and it was interesting to see this because whenever I think of Jonathan Banks and Eddie Murphy, I think of Beverly Hills Cop because he's a bad guy in Beverly Hills Cop. So I would always be like, I always get confused. I'd always get confused with 48 Hours. And I was like, no, he's in Beverly Hills Cop. I didn't know he was in both.
Yeah.
I didn't know he was in both movies. I was like, wait, was he in Beverly Hills Cop or both movies? And then it was so nice to see him. And Jonathan Banks, he's just one of those actors that he's just interesting. Like when he talk, how's your wife? Still mean as a snake. He just has these he makes interesting choices for a small role in the thing that they're going there. And so they established that they know each other. That's kind of like in the beginning of that rival kind of banter between two cops, Jonathan Banks and his partner. His partner was really forgettable to me. I think that we could have done a better job with that. But so they go upstairs. They're questioning. What was the point? Oh, somebody stole credit cards, right? There was and they were buying some shit, so they were going upstairs questioning. Now, Nick Nolte is just not a good cop.
No.
He's just fucking not good.
No, he's terrible.
Yeah, first of all, what the fuck is he doing there? He heard about it over the radio. Okay, so you heard about it over the radio, so he's like, I'm just going to hang out in the lobby and see if you guys need me. So they go up there, guns start blasting. First of all, they wave I get it. This was a time we are way more savvy with weapons control. We're way more savvy with police procedure because of shows like The Wire and stuff like that. These are back in the 80s when it's like, if you're a cop, then you basically can do anything you fucking want to do.
The 70s version of cop was like a man with a license to kill.
You could have a shootout on the freeway with a bus and ride your Cadillac through a store window and then just get a lecture by the chief and be like, all right, fuck you. And then go off and continue doing shit.
Nobody ever gets suspended for getting in a shootout. You go right back to work. It's like you just unloaded on a city street and crashed into a building. And then it's like you said, you get chewed out by the chief and you're immediately right back to work.
You're back to work. And you have a fucking convict with you that you borrowed from prison. And then at some point you lose.
That is a thing you could only get away with in this period. Nobody's going to believe that now. I'm just going to go let this convict out and he's going to travel around with me getting it. And by the way, multiple times in the course of this movie, that convict gets a hold of a gun.
Yeah.
Multiple times.
Yeah. And we've gotten so much more sophisticated with weapons handling because they just fucking, he pulls out that 44. I think it was a Smith & Wesson. He pulls out a Smith & Wesson 44. He's just waving that motherfucker around, holding it up by his head, finger on the trigger the whole time, and he runs the shootout. Then he gives Gantz his fucking gun. When would a cop ever do that? You take away your only chance to protect yourself and protect the guy that's in front of you. The only reason he's not killing you or that guy is because you have the fucking gun.
Yes.
And he gives the guy his fucking gun.
No, that is the number one rule in a hostage standoff situation is the cop will never really release his gun. Will never. Whenever I see a scene in TV shows or whatever where the person's got a hostage, drop your gun, and the cop dropped his gun, I'm like, this person has no idea how this actually works. Cop will never drop his gun. He's going to keep it pointed at your head. If you do shoot the hostage, he's going to immediately kill you. And the only thing keeping you from killing the hostage is the knowledge of that, right? And they know that.
So I thought maybe, too, they were setting it up. So he gave his gun and then he regrets it. And then at the end when Gantz has Reggie Hammond and he has him there that Nick Nolte be like, I'm not falling for that one again. And I guess they do kind of set that up where he doesn't give him the gun. But either way, it was just fucking and then he goes back to his office and they're like, hey, they're ribbing, and I'm like, wait a minute, 2 cops are fucking dead.
They're
you know what I'm
dead.
saying? They're fucking
Nick
dead.
Nolte
And
lost his gun.
Yeah, and they're hazing him like, you didn't get your gun, did you? And it's like, what the fuck? But how cool was that police precinct slice of life where Walter Hill just lets the camera just run, and Nick Nolte's stumbling, trying to get ballistics and going to get in the 44, and people are like calling out, talking shit or whatever. And it's like, I love that gritty cop stuff.
As you said at the beginning, it's a very 70s style.
Yeah.
And I mentioned this at the beginning, but what I think is magical about 48 Hours is it is that 70s style of action movie, that 70s style of cop drama movie, but filtered through the lens of the insane cocaine of the 80s. Like the thing with the 80s during the cocaine period is every genre was dialed to 11. So you take the cop movie of the 70s, the gritty cop drama of the 70s, and you inject cocaine into it and you dial it to 11, and everything is just so over the top in every scene, right? It's just everything's turned all the way up. And I think that's the magic of the movie.
And I try to, so, it's interesting because if you think about it, Nick Nolte's character kind of like, there's nothing redeeming. Like, he kind of breaks like all the, when screenwriters are like, there's got to be, like, he doesn't save no fucking cat.
He doesn't save any cats. He's not nice to kids or dogs.
And you fucking like him. And I don't understand, and I watched this trying to understand why. But the thing about Nick Nolte as an actor, and in this, and maybe because he was a legendary drinker on this film particularly, he was crushing screwdrivers all day. So if I'm watching a movie or seeing something, I can tell when an actor knows they're on screen, when they know where the camera is, where they know where the lighting is, when they're hitting their lines, they know how a line's going to come off. I never catch Nick Nolte acting. I never catch him in a moment where I feel like he has no fucking idea he's in a movie.
Like he just wandered in front of the camera and he's doing stuff.
Exactly. Like they went and got a grizzled fucking cop who was a cop. Now he's homeless on the street, and they clean him up and they put a fucking thing on and they put him in there. You believe him. You believe every word he says. And his point of view is so strong. That's where the comedy comes from. And then when you meet Eddie Murphy for the first time, how exciting, because this megawatt star in the Roxanne.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. The best character intro maybe ever.
Right.
Yeah.
But, going back and I'm watching this and I'm like, wait a minute. He's going to sign out a fucking convict to hang out with him for 2 fucking days, 48 hours?
Yeah.
And they're going to go solve some shit? I don't know. It's hard to swallow, now.
Yeah, this is the cocaine field fever dream of how reality works. None of these things actually work this way.
Yeah.
But somebody said, what would be cool, as they were doing their 4th line of coke? They're like, what would be cool is if a cop got a criminal and they solved crimes together, and the other guys who were super coked out, like, yeah, that's a great fucking idea. We should do that. That's what's happening here. None of this is real. All of it is just like a fever dream.
So, that setup, though, even though you're like, that's kind of bullshit, but then it's like, this is so fun. I'm into this. Like
that's the thing, is it is fun. It's a bunch of people sitting around going, what would be fun is if this thing happened. And whether or not that thing would ever happen, the reality of the situation never even comes into the conversation.
Right.
Yeah.
Whether Eddie Murphy whether this was all instinctual, because he says publicly, I didn't really know how to act at the time, but he was so gifted. There's a lot of complexity in his performance, in the sense that he is somebody with dignity, but just grew up in really hard circumstances. Because even the crime, I don't know why he was in jail, but the reason he had the money is they were robbing drug dealers. So there's still like a bit of dignity to what he was doing. There is a sort of code. And every time Nick Nolte would, he was almost above, he was above Nick Nolte's bullshit. It's like, even when Nick Nolte provoked him to a fight or whatever, he's like, dude, I'm going to have to end up fucking you up, and like, it's going to be a thing. Like, he kind of came underneath Nick Nolte when Nick Nolte would fucking get angry. He goes, I'm going to tell you something right fucking now. We are not friends. We are not partners. You're going to do what I say. I fucking own your ass. And he's just like, well, all right, dude. Like, he's just kind of like, if he was an actor, he's making very smart choices to elevate his character above the duo.
Well, and I think that's what makes it work. I think if he wasn't the more dignified of the two, the relationship between them doesn't work, because he's legally he is the lesser of them, because he's the convict, the felon, the prisoner, and the other guy's a cop. But and so socially they're at different levels, but emotionally, Eddie Murphy's the one who's got his shit together. Nick Nolte's a fucking mess. And so they play it that way. They let it play out that way. That Eddie Murphy doesn't rise to the bait. Nick Nolte keeps trying to bait him, keeps trying to like insult him to see if he can get a rise out of him. And Eddie Murphy plays the dignified version of it, where he doesn't rise to the bait. He just lets it go, right?
Now let's talk a little bit about James Remar.
You didn't you one time you jerk off with him in a trailer on set?
It was a piece of bread. It's an old game. That's fans aren't interested, or the listeners aren't interested in that. No, I'm kidding. No, I will tell my James Remar story, but let's just talk a little bit about James Remar and his performance in this. Now, let me ask you a question. Okay, whenever I think of buddy cop villain, I always go to James Remar. And there's something so compelling about him in this movie. And like I said earlier, how they were just they're wild animals. Like, they're not, there's no skill, right? There's no, like, they're just crazy, and they will kill you. Yeah.
They're just wild sociopaths.
Yeah. And Billy Bear, I mean, I think there's a little craziness in real life. Hearing all the stories of what happened in Predator, and they found him on the dance floor, like licking women's ankles, and he had to have a bodyguard to protect other people from him that followed him around and everything like that. And then, like, if you think about Sonny, the scene when, was it Reggie, that when he kicks the door in and he's sitting there with his shirt off, and he looks at him and smiles, and you're like, this guy is a crazy motherfucker. This is not like his presence. And you feel real danger, right? And it's the same thing when he fucking cuts his chest in Predator. And you're like, I believe that this guy would do, this is what he would do. He doesn't even know he's in a movie right now. I don't even think
he's acting right now.
He's not even acting. They just went and told him there is this 6'7" alien who wants to fight you. And he's like, where? And he comes down the thing.
And he's just slicing himself. Yeah.
That's the thing. And when he says that gun and he fucking looks or whatever. But I will say, and this is going to be a hot take, James Remar could have done more with this. He could have shown another dimension to this character. There could have been another layer, because it is fantastic what he's doing. His presence is fantastic, but it borders on cartoonish at some points. And the most interesting scene, I think, in this movie is when he's ordering the hookers on the phone, because you see and then Billy Bear comes up and he's like, what about me? And he's like, oh yeah, do you have any? And he starts to order, so there's something like another side that like, oh, this is interesting, whatever. But when you're just like, and shooting the gun the whole time, it becomes less interesting of a while. But James Remar is so fantastic in this that I forgive it, but I'm like, man, there's another gear that could have been hit with that.
Yeah, and I think that is the sort of, I don't want to say tragedy. Tragedy is not the right word, but the thing with James Remar is there was a moment there where he could have been huge, and something, I don't know what it was. I don't want to speculate, but something held him back. Something kept him from turning into the megastar.
We all know what it is. He's very open about it.
Oh, okay, I don't know. I don't want
substance.
Drugs,
okay,
yeah,
alcohol.
okay, so yeah.
And that I had a long. So I think I've told him on the podcast. If I did, Joseph, please edit it out. And
no, it's a good story. You can tell it again.
Well, he had he was in an episode of The Unit, and I remember walking in the trailer and he was there, and I am a huge. Obviously, we're doing a fucking podcast devoted to 48 Hours, and I'm a huge fan of his. In 48 Hours, we'll probably get into the Warriors and why we do this podcast, but I'm a big fan of his. I'm a movie nerd, and I think he's done some really great work. And I even love him in Sex and the City. He's good in everything he does. right? So I was like, hey, you know, I went over and talked to him. I was like, I'm a big fan, and we started talking, and he was like, we had a great, you know, we had a great conversation open and everything like that. So then I'm in my trailer, you know, kind of forgetting about this. Now, Ty, you know how trailers, when you shut and they latch locked, right?
Yeah.
You know, he kicks the door in of my trailer. Boom! Shoo, it flows okay, boom! And he goes, you jerking off in there? And I was like, no. And he comes in, he's like, you want to run lines? I was like, yeah, let's fucking run lines. So we went and we ran like lines of our scene and did all this stuff, and we talked. And that's when I had this long talk, and I was like, dude, you're the, like, some of your, like, you know, after 48 hours and everything, you were the fucking man. And he said, you know, I made a lot of mistakes. During that time, I had a real moment, but I kind of went a little crazy. I went a little crazy, and I turned a lot of things down that I shouldn't have turned down. And, you know, I was deep into the substance. And now he's like, he's kind of got everything back on track and kind of got his life. And he says, now I'm kind of, you know, rebuilding and coming back. And I think he's doing, you know, now he's really rebuilding with, but he's somebody that I really like and always admire. And I think he's fantastic in this. And he's just, you know, like Jonathan Banks or whatever, there's something about certain actors with their own screen and they're just interesting. They could read the phone book.
Yeah. Jonathan Banks was a guy who was never the star. I think up until he really broke. I mean, obviously he was in his like late 60s or early 70s when he started doing Breaking Bad. And even in that, he starts out as just sort of a side character and then develops into an incredibly important character in Breaking Bad and then later in Better Call Saul. But I think those are really his first kind of starring parts. He's always the that other guy. He's in a lot of movies. Like you look at his IMDb, Jonathan Banks' IMDb is like 17 pages long, but he's never the lead in anything. But he's just got one of those faces and one of those methods of delivery that he pops even in small scenes, even in just little scenes. He always just pops. Yeah.
So when you first see Eddie Murphy on the screen and he's singing Roxanne, you think, oh, wow, this guy, this is Nick Nolte's movie, but this guy has potential to be a star in Nick Nolte's movie. There's something really, his presence, his charisma, there's something really interesting, and you get it right away, right?
Didn't they get equal billing in this movie, though? I think they got equal billing.
But it's Nick Nolte's the first 20 minutes. It seems like it's a Nick Nolte movie, right? Yep. And then you're like, oh, this guy's a star. This guy who's in a Nick Nolte movie is a star, and he's going to have a bright future, and there's a charisma, and I love watching him. When they get to Torchies, it is a massive tectonic shift where you're like, no, this motherfucker is a star. And it's not Nick Nolte's movie. This is Eddie Murphy's movie. And he shifts everybody on his side in that bar scene. And that bar scene is a one-act play. It is fantastic. And I don't like white people, like all the shit that he does, and when he imitates their voice, I mean, he's just on a fucking roll, and he's like, bullshit, you're too stupid to have a job. He's just on a roll, and he's just killing it. And that, to me, is when Eddie Murphy became a full-fledged movie star at Torchies.
Yes. Yeah. Well, he has a couple of scenes in this movie in particular that after this movie came out, and then Eddie Murphy was in everything for like a decade, right? You get it. You understand why a whole bunch of studio executives watched 48 Hours and went, let's get that guy. Let's put him in everything. Yeah, I mean, this was the launching pad for, I think, for 20 years, Eddie Murphy was like one of the top bankable movie stars in Hollywood.
Well, I mean, you think about this period, you had this, Trading Places, Beverly Hills Cop, in the 80s, like with Coming to America, and he was on the curve, right? Like he was the tastemaker. He was on the edge, like Coming to America. And we should do it on this podcast at one point. Like
I love Coming to America. So yeah,
I don't, as a kid watching or whatever, the kind of Eddie Murphy, like his, with Raw and Delirious or whatever, he kind of was continuing the Richard Pryor. Like there was an edge to his comedy. There's an anger in his comedy. There's a pain in his comedy. And when he's at Torchy's and when he takes the fucking thing and he throws it up, like he's taking control of all, like he's a lion in a lion's den and he's taking control of all these guys. And as he's doing that, you're falling in love with him because he's turning the power structure. You know, he's like, I'm your worst fucking nightmare. Yep. You know, a guy with a bat. You know what I'm saying? So he's like saying all these things, and I'm watching this, and it's the power of his performance that shifts, that makes you believe that, right? Yep. If there was a lesser actor or lesser performer, it would just be movie-ish. It's like you'd be like, there's no fucking way that this bar would just bend over and let this guy do this. But when Eddie Murphy does, you're like, I believe it. This works, and it's fucking funny. It's hilarious, you know.
Well, it's the intensity that he brings to the performance. And one thing that I've noticed in a lot of movies that I've seen is good stand-up comedians, because I think most stand-up comedy comes from a place of sadness or anger. And so when you get stand-up comedians, you put them in dramatic roles, or in 48 Hours, Eddie Murphy's part is largely comedy, but he has dramatic moments right in there. The anger underneath his comedy comes out, and it's believable. It's real, because I think his stand-up comedy is also fueled by that anger, so he's able to tap into it when he needs to. And so those moments when, like where you're talking about Torchy's, where he's in the bar, the anger underneath Reggie Hammond, the anger at these white people who think they're better than him, and the fact that he feels like he was unjustly imprisoned and he's been screwed over in life, all of that anger comes boiling out, and you understand why people are scared of him in that moment. And I think stand-up comedians are able to tap into that. You see it over and over in movies that will bring a stand-up comedian to play a dramatic role, and they're surprisingly good.
Yeah. In my opinion, I think it's flipped. I think this is more dramatic comedy second with Eddie Murphy. And even when Nick Nolte gives his version of a racist white guy's apology for being racist, and he's telling him he's sorry, he's like, that doesn't really explain everything, but I know how the world works, and I know like what your mindset is and whatever. So he just kind of laughs it off. But you know, the reality is like he came through every step of the way. As a character, as the relationship, when he says, I'm going after the money, he goes after the money. First of all, Nick Nolte goes back, right? This is all within 48 hours, obviously. He goes back to the station. He's already was involved in a cop being killed.
Yep. He already lost his service weapon.
He's already lost his service weapon. Now, and he was in a shootout in a subway, and he lost the guys there, and then he lost the fucking prisoner that he's supposed to be supervising. Yep. Like, does he just fight? Like, when is he gonna get in trouble for this?
How is he not in jail?
How is he not in jail? We got to give a shout out to Brian James, who is one of the great 80s actors movies. And he's in this movie, and I almost wish I didn't know about Another 48 Hours.
Yeah.
Even though when you're watching this, it's like, yeah, clearly this guy's fucking dirty, just because it's Brian. But, this was like, my first time I saw Brian James, and it might have been this year, was in Blade Runner.
Oh, yeah.
And then he was just the guy that just came up. He was in a lot of Walter Hill movies and everything like that, but he was one of the great 80s character actors.
Yeah, Brian James is a lot like Jonathan Banks in that way, that Brian James was never like the star of anything. Like his IMDb page is like 17 pages long. He was in everything. I
mean, was Jonathan Banks he probably wasn't a household name until Breaking Bad, wouldn't you say?
He was not. He was not a household name. He was in a lot of stuff. He worked constantly.
Right.
But he was always like guy number 4. He was always way down the cast list,
Right.
And like I said, he always popped. But Brian James was the same way. He was never the guy. He was never number 1 on the call sheet, but he just always popped.
Yeah.
And there's just something. So Jonathan Banks always, like when he was a young man, way before Breaking Bad, when he was like in his like late 20s, he still seems like Mike from Breaking Bad, because Jonathan Banks in every scene he's in seems tired. He seems tired. He seems put upon. He's just like that. Oh, fuck. Why do I always have to do everything? Just radiates off of him, right?
Right.
Brian James, in every scene he's in, radiates this like seething threat. And I don't know what it is about Brian. Maybe it's just his face. Maybe it's that he's a physically imposing character. But every Brian James scene, he just seems like he's about to kill somebody.
And he's lying. Like, you don't trust him.
Yep.
There's something like insidious about his presence, you know, and you're like, he could never be, well, I mean, maybe he could. I don't know. I haven't seen it. But like if he was in a family drama, the whole time you'd be like, he's either going to kill all these fucking kids or he's, you know, something's off with this whole thing. Like, you couldn't see him as like a straight
You would be
man.
waiting for him to commit a murder.
Yeah, you would be waiting for him to commit a murder. That's why in Blade Runner, when he's like going through the test or whatever, you're like, something's like, the tension was already there because you're like, something's not right about this mother.
Let me tell you about my mother.
Yeah.
And then he blows the guy through the wall.
The biggest hard suspension of disbelief for me is when Reggie Hammond is at his nightclub when the bus boys are just going off. By the way, what a great fucking 80s band, the Bus Boys. You know, the boys back in town, like, you know, and they're fucking killing it at this club. I mean, this club is hopping. You know, everybody's having a good time and it's fun. And it's also like, I love the contrast between the stick up their ass, like, the bar they went into, and then this one is like everybody's just having a good time and it's fun and this other thing. But Ola Ray, do you remember her from Miami Vice? Ola Ray, she's the girl that he meets on the dance floor that he's dancing with.
Yeah.
Right,
no,
right.
I do know her. Yep.
So this is the hardest. This is the hardest suspension of disbelief for me. Okay, so he meets Ola Ray and they're dancing, they're having a good time. Okay, so that's going well. But she is beautiful. She's well put together. Meaning like she's really intelligent, and her character is right. And he's like, I need to have sex. Like, we need to go have sex. So, you know, like, she's gonna be like, fuck you. Like, I just met you. I'm just gonna dance with you. So, okay, that's the one hurdle. And you're like, okay, maybe she feels sorry for him. Okay, whatever. Da 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 da. Then he's like, when Nick Nolte shows up and he goes and talks to Nick Nolte and he's like, here, wait for me. I'm gonna do this. Then he's like, hey, can I go? He shows up. She's talking to somebody else. And he's like, he interrupts them and is like, you know, get the fuck away. And he says, you know, when you're horny, you know, you get this brave courage or whatever. And he's like, okay, we need to go across the street and everything. Then you're like, okay, there's no fucking way that now she's going to go across. And then he says, and I don't have any money. So you're going to have to pay for it. You know, go to the thing. And it's still happening. And then at the end of the movie, somehow he finds her again. And then they sleep together, and he's like, okay, now I got to go back to prison. And I'm like, I just don't believe. I think she has higher standards. I just don't think he's going to allow Eddie Murphy to grab her by the arm. Everyone has
higher standards than that.
Yeah, I just don't think, I don't think she would allow somebody to grab her by the arm. And then when they were going across the street, and he sees Luther taking off with the bag, and then he fucking just spins her around and throws her back in. At that point, you're done. Like, you're fucking done. Like, how did you go back and find her? And he never had to smooth it over with her. She's just like, all right.
It is the 80s cocaine version of how romance works.
Right.
It's the version that crazy 80s thinks is possible. Anyone who has ever met another human being, woman or not, knows that this doesn't work.
Right. One thing that I don't think ages well is like his 64 sky blue Cadillac is awesome. And back then, I guess it was supposed to be a piece of shit.
Yeah.
And you look at that and you're like, that's a badass fucking car.
Isn't it like rusty though?
It's a little bit rusty and hubcaps fall off or whatever, but you know, I mean, it's a good looking Cadillac, you know, it's got that straight body, the fucking is convertible and everything like that. He can't drive worth a shit. I got a question. Luther has the tag for Reggie Hammond's car with the money in it. Why is he just getting the money now? Why didn't he go get the money before?
Because then the plot won't happen.
Yeah, I know. There is some, you know, you go back and watch. Here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen, listeners. Obviously, we love this movie. We're talking about this movie. There's a lot of bad things in it that we're talking about, but also there's just a lot of like, what? Like, why didn't Luther go get the money? What happened to Luther's girlfriend?
Why isn't Nick Nolte in jail?
Why isn't Nick Nolte in jail? Like, why isn't? And I think we've gotten so much more sophisticated as an audience that, and here's my biggest one. They go to Billy Bear's girlfriend's house, early on in the thing, when she's going to hit him with a bat, and he's like, I'd hit you in the fucking head with this bat, and they're in the thing. So they go there. Billy Bear's not there, right? They establish that, okay, this is Billy Bear's girlfriend, and she's like, we had a thing, but it's over now and everything. So they leave. Then they get in this fist fight, which we need to go in and talk about this fist fight. Then they get in this fist fight on thing. He's like, you got to come clean with me right now, right here, right now. And they get in this big fist fight. Cops show up, and they're like, again, it's the immunity for everything because you're a cop. And he's like, yeah, sorry, I know we're fighting in the street and fucking, but here's my badge. And they're like, oh, all right, see you later. But by the way, we got a call from 2 women that people were coming impersonating cops. Okay. So how did they make the leap? And I know that he says, I run to my girlfriend if there's something sad or whatever. And he's like, you think he's going to run to his girlfriend? So how do they make that leap? And that leap was uncommitted. It was like, maybe not. I mean, I don't want, he did, I think it's bullshit, but I don't want to go back to jail. So let's go Chinatown, huh? So they go to Chinatown, and then they come in. There's no doubt in their head. Fucking Nick Nolte puts his hand over her mouth, throws her up against the wall, pulls the gun out to her fucking head. Yeah. And it's like, we know he's here. Where is she? And they're saying, so I'm like, wait a minute. First of all, like, why did they call, if they were harboring Billy Bear, why did they call the cops in the first place? And second of all, when did you get so convinced? Is there a scene cut out where you saw him in the apartment? And then third of all, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, what the fuck?
But that's what I mean. Everything's dialed to 11.
Right.
Like there is the normal version of the scene where you go meet with her and you say, hey, have you seen this guy? We've heard he's escaped. We're looking for him
somehow.
And she tips you off somehow. But the dialed to 11 early 80s cocaine version of that scene is you push your way in, you shove her against the wall, and you put a gun to her head. Right. Go, we know he's here. Tell us where he fucking is. Like, that's the dialed to 11 80s version.
And I think there's 4 different moments where they bust in the room on Gantz and Billy Bear, and there's a topless woman walking around or like screaming or something like that. Like every 4 thing, it's like, wait a minute, and then they're always just kind of like, they're not a part of the story. They're just kind of like throw them out of the way as they chase the guy down the thing.
Yeah, I mean, this was a future Star Trek alumni, the actor Denise Crosby, who played Tasha Yar in Star Trek.
That's who she
is. One of the topless women in this.
Yeah, I was trying to place who that was. Okay. Yeah, that solves that.
So yes, every time you bust in a door to go get the bad guys, there has to be a topless woman there.
In the world of police chiefs getting pissed off, where would you put Franck McRae?
I think Franck McRae
in the ranking
is the prototype for the 80s pissed off police chief.
I think he's done this 4 times. I think he's did this 4 times, right?
I think this is the only role he's allowed to play.
Yeah. And by the way, there is not one line that is not screamed at the top of his lungs that he has. No. God damn it. He's just fucking going off. Was this before? Oh, yes. This was obviously before Beverly Hills Cop. Yeah. I think you're right. This might be the first pissed off chief. And
he's the prototype. He's the guy. He's the one.
He is the prototype.
They're all based on him now.
And I love him. He's like one of my favorite parts of the movie when he's just fucking just livid and spit's flying out of his mouth and he's just going off. He was a lineman for the Chicago Bears and he's fantastic.
And he looks like it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is why I don't know if you like the movie The Other Guys, but one of my favorite things about The Other Guys is the flip on the angry police chief where it's played by Michael Keaton and he's super nice and he works at Bed Bath & Beyond. He's like super nice to them, good. And they keep wanting him to yell at them, but he won't.
And he's like, and doesn't he try at some point to yell at them? And he's like,
and it just doesn't work.
Yeah, that's hilarious. Do you see the?
But yes, this is like whenever you think about the pissed off police chief, like the mayor's up my ass. I got $1 million, and like whenever you think of that it started with this guy. This was the guy. Yeah.
The mayor's up my ass. But I think we're just way, a lot of these things that I'm pointing out, I think we're just way more sophisticated as an audience.
Yeah.
And even in terms like a show like The Wire, you watch The Wire and then you're going to call bullshit on all the other cop movies you've ever seen because it's so true to like the procedural and stuff like that. But it's fucking hilarious to me. Like that bus shootout that they had, like Reggie Hammond, who's a convict, and Nick Nolte are just blazing out of their convertible, just fucking firing, at everything.
Yep.
And they're firing through the windows of this bus.
By the way, in the middle of a city.
In the middle of the city. Oh, we didn't mention San Francisco, by the way. What a great cinematic backdrop. But anyway, they're fucking blazing out of the window, shooting. I mean, 2 or 3 people were dead after that, if that happened in real life, right? Stray bullets were everywhere.
Those bullets that don't hit that go through the bus, they go somewhere.
They're going,
and there's
through
buildings on both sides everywhere.
Yeah. And we should do like a spoof on like the real consequences of these action movies and like the real tragedies that these people don't think that are having. Somebody's drinking milk at night out of their free and just fucking getting shot in the back of the head. It's not like, okay, Reggie, you got to go back to jail because you were just in a major shootout with a fucking firearm or anything like that. It's just like, guys, God damn it, don't do that again. And they're like, all right. And they go back out to solve their crimes. Yeah. Never mind the store window that the caddy went through or anything like that.
And it's like, they're like, they get a stern talking to. All right, Nick Nolte, stop giving the felon a gun and letting him shoot up the streets of San Francisco. Nick Nolte, okay, I'll be more careful next time.
And then at the end, when it's over, Nick Nolte gives him the money, the drug money. He's like,
well,
you know what?
He would.
He's like, it's your money. And then he's like, you might need to loan me money to borrow a car. But to not discredit the honorability of his character, he says, but if you, that doesn't change anything. If you go sideways, I'm on your ass. I'm going to get your ass. Oh, okay. Good job. Everything like that. Did you think it was earned? I think it was one false note, which I liked what they were trying to do. Whenever there's you think about In the Heat of the Night, and there is a lot of racist in the movie In the Heat of the Night. But you look at
it is a movie about racists.
Right. But what the thing is though, you look at what the movie's saying as a whole. So each individual behavior is serving a point that undermines racism. Right?
Yes.
And you walk out.
It's attacking institutional racism.
It's attacking institutional racism, right? So you think of this movie and you're like, what is this movie saying about racism? What is the ultimate thing? And they thought they were undermining racism and they were trying to undermine racism, but that's racist's idea of undermining racism, right?
And racism is mostly played as funny.
Yeah.
Which doesn't undermine racism. It makes it funny.
Yeah. So the question I was building up to ask you is, I know what they were trying to do, and I think it's a good beat in the movie. Did it seem a bit unearned? Because if you look at the scale of 48 hours, and you look at what happened up to that point, did it seem a bit unearned when Frank McRae is getting onto them, and Nick Nolte's like, God damn it, he's got more dignity than any cop I've ever served with. And just like really stands up for him in a way. And I want that moment, to be there. It just didn't feel as if it was like, oh, this was earned and this is what we're coming for.
It felt like it does. It feels like the script. It feels like this is what the writer thought would make up for the racism. Have the most racist character act like he really respects the person that he's been super racist to this whole time. It's a classic trope. It's the classic trope of the one black player on the team and everybody's super racist to him. And then the last 5 minutes of the movie, everybody's clapping for the black player, right? It's that moment, right? It's like, oh, this makes up for all the racism because now we like him. Now he's okay. It felt like that moment. But it is, I mean...
and then Reggie Hammond...
And by the way, having the white cop lecture the black police chief about the dignity of black people... come on.
And then Reggie Hammond is like, I think you're being a little hard on him. Like, the thing is like, what the fuck? Where did that come from?
Yeah. But it's the scene that they feel like they have to have, because you have to have that moment that apologizes for the racism. And this is supposed to be that moment. right?
Right.
Like, oh, we know he was super racist before this, but this is the scene that makes it okay, where he actually like, oh, I really respect him actually, even though I was racist to him for the whole movie.
So we can't finish until we talk about the fight scene between the two.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed this fight scene, and I think Walter Hill again goes back to what was playing out in their emotional lives towards each other turned into the physical sparring. So the emotional and verbal sparring turned into the physical sparring. And what makes sense is Eddie Murphy he moved well, he was smaller, and so he was moving around him, and Nick Nolte's kind of, lumbering and kind of uncoordinated and just throwing these wild punches. And so Eddie Murphy was getting the better of him in a way that makes sense. And the surprise on Nick Nolte's face, I fucking love, because he's just like getting fucking jacked and like, moving like that. And he's like, you see him figuring out, and he's like, shit, this guy's better than me. And then he has to use his one advantage, is like, and he fucking uses his size to then bog him down. And then he finally starts hitting him. And then the fight just goes on and on and on, and there's humor in how long it's going on, right?
Yeah, it's one of those. It's not as ridiculously over the top as They Live.
Yeah, no,
but it is one of those. It's funny because it keeps going. Fight scenes, yeah.
And the punchline of the fight is when they get back in the car, and you could tell Nick Nolte's a little salty because he it could have went either way. And he gets in there and he takes a swig of his whiskey and gets fucking one more jab in the jaw of the face, and then it's like it punctuates the whole thing, which is great.
It is a joke that works so well that it has been stolen 1,000 times.
Right.
I mean, even the Avengers movie does it, where like the Hulk and Thor are fighting together against the alien invaders, and they're standing there after they've just won, and Hulk punches Thor off of the screen. Direct ripoff of the 48 hours moment, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's been stolen so many times because it does work so well.
There's so many, like, I'm sorry, go ahead, Ty.
Oh, I was just going to say that, like, as a person who has been around people who fight a fair amount, as much as I enjoy the fight, I don't buy it for a second. I think Nick Nolte is a bear. I think if you get in a fist fight with him, unless you're equally a bear, he is just going to pile drive you into the ground, and you're just going to die, right? But I agree with you that the way they did it at least made it movie believable, right? Like the quick guy getting jabs and doing all that stuff.
It stayed within the rules of their consistent fight. So when he was in the
movie version of fight consistency,
movie version, because there's nothing realistic in the violence in this. When they meet James Remar and Billy Bear, one of the things I love is like, so they're going to see the handoff, right? There's no like, let me get an angle, let me hide behind this thing. They're just standing there fucking watching them. And then when they get made, Nick Nolte whips out his gun in front of all these fucking people, and he's just running towards them, straight line towards them as they're shooting. And then Remar is like fucking this, and they pull the guns, and it's like, it's just fucking hilarious. There's no stealth. Like they just, that big old lumbering bear of a man. But I will say, so when he was at that bar, when Eddie Murphy was at Torchy's, there was moments where he was ducking punches coming underneath him. So it showed like there's a little bit of training. And if Nick Nolte was not trained and Reggie Hammond is trained, Reggie Hammond would eat his fucking lunch if they were throwing punches.
Right.
And then Nick Nolte then uses his size and grabs a hold of him. And that's what changes the fight direction. So even in the movie world, and he created the rules and everybody's talent and capabilities, and he stayed consistent with that thing. So that's what I love about that fight scene going forward. But just the subtle character things, like one thing that makes me laugh is at the last scene at the bar when they're sitting there drinking together. Nick Nolte has a drink. He's drinking, right? Then he goes to the payphone. And he's on his payphone. He takes out his flask and he's drinking. He couldn't take 5 minutes to go call whoever he's calling. No. And he's drinking out of his flask. And then he comes back in and takes his drink and starts drinking out of his drink. This is fucking classic. Classic.
Yes, that is a fantastic scene because it is like the drinking has begun. I'm not taking any breaks. So I got table drinks and I got travel drinks.
Cool. Do you want to add anything else before we move on to the fun stuff?
No, the only thing I would say is this is one of the best movies of this type that was ever made. It launched an entire genre of movies. It launched Eddie Murphy's career as a huge movie star for decades after this. But if you're watching it for the first time, be aware, just a little warning for if you're going to watch it for the first time, this is 70s level racism and 80s level cocaine mixed together. It is going to be transgressive. It is going to be racist, misogynist, all of those things. Just be aware going in. I hate the phrase trigger warning, but just be aware. If those things are a big problem for you, do not watch this movie. You will not have fun. All right, so what are we doing now? Are we done?
We got top 5 Walter Hill movies.
Well, the patrons have a couple questions first. Let's give them a little love.
Let's go.
One of
patrons, ask your questions.
Asks, what song would you be singing in your cell?
Oh.
Ooh, good question. I mean, I love Roxanne. I love that choice. That's a fantastic song. And the nice thing about the song Roxanne is no matter how shitty your voice is, you can still sing Roxanne because you're basically just yelling. Which I love. I love that choice.
I like this question. This is a good question. Yeah. And I probably would want to sing. I would probably want to listen to something against type. Like I wouldn't want to listen to like any hard metal or because you're in fucking prison. So I would want to have an escape movie or escape song. Probably Sailing by Christopher Cross.
Yeah, I know what mine would be because it's the song. If I'm just wandering around the house,
Sailing, take me away.
If I'm just wandering around the house and I'm just start singing to myself or singing to my wife or whatever, the song I always sing is "Can't Get Enough of Your Love." Darling, I can't get enough of your love, babe.
Hey, we all know you be singing that to your cellmate, buddy. We all know you.
Oh yeah,
can't get enough of you.
And if I have a cold, so my voice gets low, like I can nail Barry White. So yeah, that I'd be singing some Barry White probably.
Alrighty, Choggle asks, which car, the busted ass caddy or Reggie's dusty ass Porsche?
I'm taking. Does he have a Porsche or does he have a Carmen Ghia?
It's a Porsche.
It's a Porsche. Okay, yeah. It looks like a Carmen Ghia.
I'm taking a caddy. I mean, are you asking like practical? Because I think Eddie Murphy's car would be worth more. But I love the sky blue caddy. I love that. I love Cadillacs. I love that big boat of a car. There's something about that car that I just got a great vibe from it. I would do the caddy.
See, and I'm the opposite. I hate big boat cars. So I'd probably be doing the Porsche.
Irish asks, aside from each other, what would be the first thing you would want to do when you get out on a pass from prison?
Aside from each other?
Wait, like me and Ty? Like so?
Yeah, you guys doing each other.
So aside from each other, what would be the first thing that we would want to do when we got out on a pass? Is that what we said?
Yeah.
So if we got out on a pass, if we were in prison, we got on a pass, what would be the first thing we would want to do? I think we would. Well, I'm not going to speak for Ty. The thing I would want to do is the same thing that Reggie Hammond wanted to do.
Yeah. So I mean, the sex thing is obvious, but I'm going to say after some time in prison, I know for a fact that the thing I would most miss, aside from my wife, is spicy Mexican food and a margarita. So I'd be heading to the first Mexican joint I could find. Be saying, give me some enchiladas, pour as much hot sauce on those things as you can, and give me a really good margarita.
I'll be doing the margarita after. All right. Top 5 best Walter Hill films. Okay. This is going to be fun.
I mean, 48 Hours obviously is on that list. I think nobody would question it's one of the best movies Walter Hill ever made.
Right.
And it's one of his most successful films money-wise, too.
Where are you on Southern Comfort?
I saw that when I was a kid. I remember thinking it was a weird movie. That's the one about the National Guard guys fighting with the Hicks, right?
It's like Deliverance meets Apocalypse Now.
Yeah.
All right.
I mean, I only saw it one time, so I don't have a good.
All right, well, let's take that out of the running. It's an interesting movie to talk about.
Yeah, I love Hard Times.
Yeah,
I also like the movie Hard Times. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'd put Hard Times in there. It's Walter Hill's first movie. He's established a lot of that gritty, raw style. Now, this is a hot take, and it's probably I don't know where you are on this, Ty. I am not a huge Warriors guy.
Okay, So The Warriors is objectively not a great movie. It's not.
Right.
But I saw it at an age where I was the exact right age for that movie. And so I love The Warriors. And the biggest thing that I love about The Warriors, and by the way, this is a guy who's in 48 Hours too, is the David Patrick Kelly, the Warriors come out and play. Yeah. I love that actor. I love him in everything he's ever done. So I'm a big Warriors fan, but I'm willing to go. By the way, what are your feelings on Extreme Prejudice?
I have a confession to make. I've never seen Extreme Prejudice.
You never? Oh, wow.
Let me watch the trailer. Let me make sure.
Yeah, the Extreme Prejudice is basically just like a bunch of. It's like
it's Nick Nolte, right?
It's like the Magnificent Seven, but with like scumbags killing Mexican drug dealers.
Holy shit! I've never seen this movie. I did not know there was a Walter Hill movie that I didn't see. Wait, Powers Booth and Nick Nolte. I don't think I've ever seen this. It looks familiar.
I
Clancy
love
Brown?
Now, Extreme Prejudice. I don't think is a great movie, but I love Extreme Prejudice. I love that movie. I just love how over the top ridiculous it is.
Okay, fucking Clancy Brown, Nick Nolte, Powers Booth. I have to see that. You know what? Walter Hill is one of those guys. I love a loyal director that uses the same. Like they create a theater group where they use the same. They have the same team around them every time. So I've never seen that.
Now, the only remaining question for you is yes or no on Red Heat.
Okay. I don't think it's a great movie.
It's not. It's not a great movie.
I don't think it really works. It is not one of my favorite of Arnold. I'm not sure. Like I don't John Belushi. Like some of it just doesn't make sense to me. But I did see it at an age, where Red Heat should be higher on my list. So I wouldn't put it on the top 5.
And it does start out with a 5-minute scene of naked Russian men beating each other up in the snow.
That is a huge plus, but I will say this. I like Brewster's Millions. Like, I think, I love Brewster's Millions, and I would put that on the top 5.
I think that's fair.
I'll tell you this. If I want to take 2 nostalgic movies that aren't great from my childhood, I would take Streets of Fire over Red Heat.
Yeah. I think Streets of Fire is a better movie than Red Heat.
I do too.
Streets of Fire is super weird, but I think it's objectively kind of a good movie.
And I was into On the Dark Side. What's that movie?
Eddie and the
Cruisers. So I was into some Eddie and the Cruisers. I used to watch that on HBO. So I had a little bit of stock in Bill Simmons I had a little bit of stock in that the lead in Eddie and the Cruisers. So I would put Streets of Fire over Red Heat, and I would put Brewster's Millions over Red Heat.
Yeah. Well, we didn't put Red Heat up in the top list, so.
So 48 Hours, Hard Times, Extreme Prejudice. I didn't see that, so it has to be taken out.
But you're gonna see it, and you're gonna love it.
Yeah, I'm going to see it. I'm going to see it. We should do a live viewing. I wish you lived close, and we could do movie nights.
There's very little chance that I'm going to be moving to Georgia anytime soon.
What's your thoughts on Last Man Standing?
I think it's kind of a terrible movie.
Yeah, I agree.
And I wish it was good because it's like a movie I want to be good.
Yeah.
But every time I watch it, I've seen it like 2 or 3 times, and every time I watch it, I'm disappointed again. I'm like, it should have been so much better than it is.
You know what's funny? But you believe this time it's going to be better.
It's going to work this time.
It's going to work this time.
This time it'll be good.
Walter Hill is one of the most interesting artists in my favorite artist list because I love Walter Hill. He has fingerprints on movies that are my all-time favorite.
Yeah.
But he's probably the director I like the most with the most amount of bad movies.
Yeah. Did Walter Hill do Johnny Handsome?
Yes. Yeah, he did do Johnny Handsome.
Johnny Handsome.
Where's Johnny Handsome?
Johnny Handsome is like a depressing as fuck movie.
Yeah.
But I liked it. I like Johnny Handsome.
I'd put Johnny Handsome up there. I'm not scared of that.
Yeah.
Hard Time, 48 Hours, Hard Times, Warriors.
Put
Brewster
Johnny
Million.
Handsome instead of the Warriors because Wes doesn't like the Warriors.
There are things about the Warriors that I like.
And by the way, James Remar, I would jerk off with you in the trailer if you asked me to. Because I love you in the Warriors, man.
Yeah. All right. Do we want to check and see what the Patreons have done?
So they 48 Hours Warriors. See, I was right about the Warriors. Last Man Standing. That surprises me. That is not a good movie. I'm a little disappointed in their taste. Red Heat. Wow, they went for Red Heat. And Hard Times they put all the way down at honorable mention. I don't know. I think the patrons are wrong on this one. I think they missed the mark.
Well, they got Brewster Millions. They got 48 Hours up top, and they got Hard Times in there.
Yeah, but it's all the way down at honorable mention.
That's true.
They put Red Heat and Last Man Standing above Hard Times. I don't know. That ain't right.
Thank you guys for hanging out. Please like and subscribe and send your love. And Ty is going to give a what's that song you like to sing, buddy?
Can't Get Enough of Your Love.
Ty's going to sing "Can't Get Enough of Your Love" to close us out.
Do a little Barry White.
Go
no, I'm
Ty.
not sick. I need to be sick. When I have a cold, I can nail Barry White, but I don't have a cold, so
Just give us a preview. Just try it. Don't be insecure. You can do it.
Darling, I can't get enough of your love, babe. I don't know why. I can't get enough of your love, babe. Yeah.
Say goodbye, Ty.
Goodbye, Ty.